Good evening and welcome back to Empty Cloud Monastery. My name is Bhante Sudaso and I'm here with Bhante Wade. And this is the weekly mug chat session. So an opportunity to ask questions about Buddhism, and there's a chance that we might give some answers. So we'll go ahead and start with homage to the Buddha. And then if there's any questions, then we'll go ahead and try to answer some questions. So we'll start with homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namassami. And hello to the people checking in online. Hello to Rick, Julie, Joseph, Norma, John, Moriah, Mary, Mike, Lydia, Monel, and Christina. Welcome to all of you. And Maria. And I don't see any questions, so this may turn out to be the shortest mug chat on record. So if there's no questions from online, then that might be an early evening for us.
That's right.
Yeah. So, now we have a question. Okay. So John says, when I have an emotional burden that I want to share with others, how should I identify a good person to discuss it with? What do you think?
Well, let's see, just some initial ideas coming to mind. According to Buddhism, there's this concept of the Kalyana Mitta, the beautiful friend, and the Kalyana Mitta, ideally, will be a person who is wise and compassionate, and so they'll have the desire for your welfare, the wish that you be free of suffering. And also they'll be wise, so they'll know the value of things like generosity and morality and faith, having some faith, and wisdom also, studying life and understanding the cause and effect relationships in life. And it takes time to identify someone like this. And sometimes we may even find that we don't really have a beautiful friend in life. But we should try to find one, ideally. And as I said, it may take time. It does take time to get to know someone. And so if you stop and think, well, do I know someone like that? If they genuinely have, your best interests at heart, then they should probably be someone that you could share your problems with, and they may even be able to give you some good advice if you ask for it. If not, well, then you may want to consider, are there any risks in sharing this with someone else? This emotional burden that you have. If you consider this and think about it, what if you share your problems with, for example, another family member or a friend that you have? They may not meet all the ideal characteristics, but consider what will be the consequences, the ramifications of it. There are other options, though, of course. For example, you could talk to a mental health professional, not because you have a mental health problem, necessarily, or a mental illness, but because we all have emotional issues that would be helpful to talk about with others from time to time. And it's possible even to see someone who works in the mental health field, even just one time, and maybe go in and share your problems with them, and they may be able to give you some advice as well for you to consider. Many and health plans usually will cover this sort of thing. If you have to look into your healthcare plan and so on. You also could seek out a religious professional, and if you, depending on the clergy person and their setting, they may be willing to even meet with you one-on-one or something like this, and listen to what you have to say, and hopefully at least be a good listener. And you may not ask for any advice, but even if you just want to say and get off your chest what your emotions are, this may be somewhat cathartic, and help you to understand aspects of your situation that you hadn't thought of before, just by talking about it. Um, and so those are some ideas.
Good. Yeah. And Rick says, can you talk about the differences between the sense pleasure experience during sleep and rest versus the joy and stillness experience during deeper meditation? For over a year, I have directed my mindfulness towards differentiating the nuances among these mind states and their allure. Well, the biggest difference is that in right samadhi, so correct concentration, the mind is extremely alert and awake. So the mind is very peaceful and still, but it's also very awake and alert. So it's sometimes analogized to like a cat watching a mouse hole. So the cat is holding very still, but it's very alert. It's paying very close attention to that mouse hole because it wants to notice the moment the mouse starts coming out. But it also needs to hold very still, because if it moves at all, then the mouse will get scared and it won't come out of the mouse hole. So, of course, it's not a perfect metaphor because a cat watching a mouse hole has wrong intentions, and we're trying to have right intentions. But it's similar in that during Samma Samadhi, the body and mind are very still, but the body is energized and the mind is very alert, very awake, very vigilant. So like a guard diligently watching a gate. Again, it's this mind of attentiveness. Whereas during rest or napping or sleeping, then the mind might be very peaceful and the body might be very relaxed. But the mind will also tend to be very blurry and unclear. And the mind will also be slipping into dream states. So the mind will also be producing a lot of noise, a lot of delusional noise, a lot of imaginative imagery and words. So again, it's quite different. There is a shared trait of tranquility, but that's it. Otherwise, they're very different states. So the state of meditative concentration, it's more like a quality of hypervigilance. So it has more in common with, again, like if you're engaged in high-speed sports, for example, you have to be completely present and really attentive to everything that's going on, or else you'll miss your opportunity. I remember once when I was a child playing baseball, and I think I was on second base or something, and I was kind of spacing out because nothing much was really going on. Baseball is actually a really boring game, by the way, both to watch and to play. So I was kind of spacing out and nothing much was really going on. And I didn't notice that the ball was actually coming right at me. And then I was like, oh, but it was too late. I had missed it. So if I had actually been paying attention, then I probably could have caught the ball. And everyone was mad at me because I screwed up on this occasion. I still remember it now, 30 years later or something. But that was actually a prime example in that if I'd actually been paying close attention, then I would have seen, oh, the ball is coming my way, and if I'm careful, I might even be able to catch it. But because I wasn't really paying much attention, then I missed my opportunity. I was very peaceful, I was very relaxed, but I was not paying attention. So again, this is the thing, is that during deep meditation, the mind needs to be very alert, ready to react at a moment's notice, but not actually reacting to anything. So we need to be ready as though something exciting might happen any moment, even though nothing will. Well, hopefully nothing will. So this is part of what makes it challenging, is that we normally associate peacefulness and tranquility, we normally associate that with dullness of mind. But during meditation, we need to have tranquility with alertness. Again, that sharp alertness, or like the alertness you need when you're driving really fast. Like driving a car really fast on the highway, you have to pay total attention every moment, or else you're going to get in an accident. So we need to have that same quality of alert attentiveness during meditation, but with a completely still body and mind. So yes, very different from the experience of sleeping or resting. Nothing wrong with resting, by the way. It's actually good to rest. If you don't rest sufficiently, then meditation is a lot harder. But during meditation, we're trying to be completely awake. Remember once again that the word Buddha literally means awake. So that already gives you a little sense of what we're trying to do during meditation. We're trying to be awake, completely awake. And also very peaceful, very serene. Okay, and Sergio, not Sergio who's currently at the monastery, but a different Sergio, says, Bhante Wade, I enjoy a lot your guided meditations. Would you consider doing a guided meditation on Buddhanusati?
Definitely, I'll consider it. Yes, and it's such a wonderful topic and a wonderful meditation object. So thank you for the suggestion. Yes.
Okay. Okay, so here Christina says, Anuruddha was thinking about the importance of having few wishes, to be content, to be mindful, etc. Then the Buddha praises him and mentions that also one should not proliferate. Can you explain? Yeah, so the word that's translated as proliferate, in Pali, the noun is papancha, and the verb is papancheti. And I like to translate papancha as complication, and the verb as to complicate. So we make complications out of things. We complicate things. So one of the classic suttas describing the papancha process is the Madhupindika Sutta from the Majjhima Nikaya, commonly translated as the honey ball, or as the lump of honey, or similar things. Madhu means honey, and Pinda means lump or ball. So the Madhupindika Sutta, the honey ball sutta. And in there it talks about how it starts with just a sensory impression. We see something, or we hear something, or we smell something, or whatever. And then, based upon that sensory impression, we have some kind of feeling. And then, based on that feeling, there starts to be some mental activities, and then we start complicating it. So we start papanchifying, which means we start generating stories and ideas in the mind. We start telling ourselves stories about what's going on, or we start imagining things that might have happened or might be happening or might happen in the future. We start dredging up memories of other things which are somewhat related or maybe not really related, but they're just fun to think about. And then we start dwelling in this whole imaginary world that we're building in our mind, and basically losing touch with reality and just spinning out our mind into all this fantastic storytelling. Which is great if you're a fiction writer and trying to produce fiction. That's fine. It's not so great if you're trying to attain awakening anytime soon. So this is the papancha process, the process of complicating the mind. So proliferating is one of the older translations of the word. So it has the sense of taking something simple and direct, such as a sensory contact, and turning it into something complicated and detailed, making it much bigger than it is, making it much more detailed and elaborate and complicated than it actually is. So this is what the Buddha is pointing to here. It's like having few wishes, that's good, that's great. Being content, that's great. Being mindful, that's great. And watch out for our tendency to complicate things. Watch out for our tendency to add a bunch of unnecessary thoughts and stories and ideas to everything. A related thing is from the Bahia Sutta, which is a very short, very profound discourse, which is commonly quoted, in which the Buddha says, in the seen, let there be just the seen. In the heard, let there be just the heard. In the known, let there be just the known. And the Buddha says, when you practice in this way, then there will be no me here or there or anywhere. And this is the end of suffering. So here the Buddha is talking about the same thing. So when you see something, well, that's all it is. Don't add anything to it. Don't build a story out of it. Just let it be exactly what it is, which is just sensory contact. That's it. No extra story. And the thing is that the stories that we add to things are always the story of me. There's endless ongoing story of me, which, by the way, is the most boring story in the world. If somebody else actually started telling you all of their thoughts, it would be the most boring thing in the world. If you actually start looking at your own thoughts and imagine that somebody else was reading that off to you, you would find it really uninteresting, most likely. If we actually start objectively looking at our thought processes, we realize most of it's just utterly boring nonsense. Complete waste of time. But it's interesting to us because it's the story of me. It's interesting to us because of our self-identity that we mix up in the story. So the Buddha's saying, if you stop the whole storytelling, you just let sight be sight and sound be sound and smell be smell and so on, without adding a story, without complicating it, then that immediately cuts out most of our self-identity process, cuts out most of the ego process, and therefore cuts out most of our suffering. So that's what the Buddha is talking about here. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
Well, no, thanks.
Okay. Maybe you can take this next one. John says, how does the Buddha's teachings on dana relate to the needs of others? Specifically, is dana practiced when someone is coerced into giving through the financial need of another?
Okay. Well, sure, John. This is great. Dana, of course, generosity is a fundamental Buddhist teaching and so important in our spiritual practice. In fact, generosity is essential for us to have the material resources that we need in life. They have a saying in Thailand that if you have food to eat, it's because you made acts of generosity in the past. So generosity underpins all the material resources that we have in life. And if we look at a specific case, this is when someone is coerced into giving through the financial need of another. Coerced, I'm trying to get a handle on the meaning here, meaning that I guess that the person who is giving feels that they must. They have a strong feeling that they must give because someone else is in dire financial straits. Well, I don't know if you mean coerced in the sense that they're sort of held at gunpoint to make a gift because somebody needs the money. But in any case, what it would come down to is your mental intentions. And so if say someone is having some real financial hardship and you didn't really want to give them, you weren't really planning to make a gift to them, you didn't really want maybe to give them some money, but you really felt like you had to. Maybe you felt guilty or you felt bad about their situation or something like this, and you're going to make the intention to give. You felt like you were going to give to them anyway. Well, if you can take a step back for a moment and say, okay, well, I'm going to make this gift, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it into an opportunity to practice generosity, and try to establish that in your heart. And you can reflect that there are tremendous benefits to generosity. The Buddha said in one scripture, he says, if beings knew, as I do, the power of generosity, then they would share even their last mouthful of food if there were someone to share it with. And elsewhere he said that if you give something to a human being, then it will come back to you at least 1,000 times over, to state it in a simple way. But if you give something to a human being, it'll come back to you 1,000 times over. And if they're virtuous, it'll come back to you 10,000 times over, it says in the sutras. And so if you reflect on this and think, well, even if you didn't initially really want to make this gift, if you reflect for a moment about how good this is and the merit that comes from it, as well as the development of your own spiritual virtues through generosity, and then you make the gift kind of with this wholehearted, generous intention, then you'll get the benefits of generosity and it'll come back to you so many times over. And so that's something I could suggest if you can take that and work with it.
So I do. And Rebecca says, how can one practice sense restraint and not slip into aversion or just shutting down to experience? So sense restraint is doesn't mean that you're ignoring your experience. So the way the Buddha describes sense restraint is he says, when seeing a sight with the eyes, one does not fixate on its details and characteristics. So he doesn't say that you don't look at things or that you ignore things. He says, when you see something, do not fixate on its details and characteristics. And further on, he goes on to say, because if you fixate on its details and characteristics, then evil, unwholesome states might invade the mind. In other words, if you fixate on the attractive or pleasing characteristics, details, then the mind might start to fall into desire. If you focus on the annoying or ugly or unappealing aspects of an experience, if you focus on those details, then the mind might slip into aversion, negativity, hatred. So we're still aware of what's going on, but we don't fixate on details that provoke our defilements. That's what sense restraint means. So sense restraint doesn't mean ignoring your senses. It means noticing how focusing on certain details of our experience can provoke our defilements and make them worse. So we want to carefully direct our attention in such a way that our defilements diminish rather than increase. This is what's called yoniso manasikara. Yoniso manasikara means directing our attention based on an understanding of causality. So yoniso means based on the origins, based on origination, based on causality. So from an understanding of causality, we use our mind in a way that does not produce more defilements, and that ideally reduces the defilements that are already present. So we're actually trying to be fully aware of our sensory experiences. And we particularly want to be aware of our tendencies towards desire and aversion. And we want to be aware of what things, when focused on, provoke our defilements. And those are the things where we want to be careful not to let the mind linger. We don't want to let the mind linger on anything that will provoke more desire or more aversion. But we still need to be aware of what's going on. We just don't let the mind fixate on provocative things. Yeah, go ahead.
I wonder if I wonder, Sadhu, your answer to Rebecca, I wonder if I could take another crack at John's question.
Let's see, what was John's question? The one about Dana?
About Dana, that's right. 'Cause there's another aspect to it that I didn't address. So, yes, thank you about that. So I addressed the aspect of giving, but I didn't address the aspect of what if you're feeling coerced into giving. And I think it is probably appropriate to say there that before you give, it'd be wise to see if you can let go, so that you don't feel like you're giving under coercion. And again, I don't know the nature of the coercion here, and so I was thinking perhaps it's just this feeling, perhaps of guilt, as I mentioned, or feeling bad for someone who's in financial hardship. And but perhaps, judging from the question, it sounds like perhaps you may not feel like it's good to give in this case for some reason or other. Perhaps it may seem like you're enabling bad behavior on their part, for example, or perhaps it's perhaps in terms of giving them money, it may be that you really can't afford to, and perhaps you have other important uses for that money. There's just some considerations. But if you can stop and let go, so that the mind is clear, you don't feel coerced, but you can see clearly and see, really, should I make a gift? And if so, how much, and perhaps under what terms or what kind, and so on like this. One way to let go is to consider the anicca, dukkha, anatta aspects of it. The Buddha said that all conditioned phenomena have these three aspects, or three characteristics, that they are impermanent, they are not satisfactory, and they are not mere mind. And so we stop and think about this condition of the financial need of another person, is an impermanent condition, one way or another. And getting involved with it is not going to be ultimately satisfying, you know. And actually, that as I said, it's not me and mine. And these are three ways of looking at it. They can help the heart to become calmer by letting go a little bit, become calmer, and then you can assess the situation a little bit better about exactly what to do. I might add that if you can make the mind calm before contemplating the situation, this will help you with the contemplation of anicca, dukkha, anatta, and with letting go and then seeing clearly what to do. So perhaps if you have a regular meditation practice, this is an important topic in your life at the time, meditate for a while and then bring it up and think about it. And yeah, I'll offer that as well.
Okay. And Shelley asks, can you explain more about how there can be merit gained from meditation? Yes. So, of course, there's different kinds of meditation, but generally speaking, when we talk about meditation, we're talking about training the mind to be more wise and more compassionate. So this, first off, it benefits yourself, first and foremost. So you yourself becoming wiser and more compassionate means that you are becoming happier. And you're moving towards awakening, which is the best thing you can do as a sentient being, is to attain full awakening. So first off, it benefits yourself. Second, as you become wiser and kinder, then you will be kinder to the people in your life. You will be kinder to all the animals and humans and insects and spirits that you meet. You will display kindness and compassion towards them, do good things for them, not cause harm to them. As your wisdom grows, you will also be less inclined to do anything harmful, because you will understand what is harm and what is benefit. And you will understand what is important and what is not important. So these are some of the immediate benefits that you'll notice in this life. And also what you're doing is you're establishing these as habits and tendencies of mind. So that then, if you don't attain full awakening in this life, then in future lives, you will be born already with a strong tendency towards kindness and compassion and wisdom. So you can also think, every time you meet a kind person, you can think, this person probably did loving kindness meditation in a past life. They probably did a bunch of metta meditation, which is why they're so naturally lovely in this life, why they're so delightful to be around in this life. The Buddha also said that kindness leads to beauty. So whenever you meet someone who's just radiant and just really lovely to look at and lovely to listen to and lovely to be around, you can think, oh, this is the result of them having done a lot of loving kindness meditation in past lives. How delightful. Or somebody who gives you good advice, someone who helps you to understand what's good and what's bad, what's wise and what's foolish. You can think, oh, this person cultivated a lot of wisdom by practicing meditation in past lives. So you can also see how your current experience of being around wonderful people must be because you yourself have also cultivated such karma in past lives. So then you can start to see how meditation practice is directly connected to the cultivation of good karma, and also to receiving the benefits of good karma. And Yongchu says, after each meditation, I've been dedicating it to all Dhamma teachers who I listen to, and also to my family members who passed on, and also my friends who passed on. Is this a good practice? Do you think it's a good practice?
I think it's great. It sounds great. When you say dedicating, I'm thinking that Yongchu means dedicating the merit, sharing the merit. Not sure. I don't know if that's what they mean, but perhaps, and that would be a wonderful practice. Perhaps you're thinking of gratitude, but I assume actually it must mean sharing the merit, and that's wonderful. I might add that also to share the merit to your karmic creditors. So anyone you may have harmed in the long round of rebirths. This is a very nice practice as well. And anumodana your practice.
Okay, and we have a question here. So Robert says, is karma dictated by an external force or purely from intentions and our own consciousness? Couldn't delusion and thinking an action is wholesome when it's not stop bad results? So, properly speaking, so the word karma means action, and specifically intentional action. And karma then produces vipaka, which means result. And it's a bit confusing because when people use the word karma in ordinary speech, they're normally talking about the combination of these two, kamma and vipaka. So kamma is the action, vipaka is the result. So, for example, the Buddha mentioned that the action of intentionally giving things to others, so the action of generosity, the karma of generosity, produces the result of wealth, whether later in this life or in future lives. So then the vipaka is wealth. So in ordinary speech, people will say things like, oh, he must have money karma. Well, that's incorrect. He has money vipaka from having made generosity karma in previous lives. So again, it's good to be clear that when we talk about karma, we're normally talking about two separate distinct things. Kamma, which is the original action, and vipaka, which is the result of that action. So as for what dictates karma, karma is dictated by your intentions. There's no external force involved. It's your own intentions. And so if you have good intentions, then that's good karma. However, if you're not paying attention to the actual effects of what you're doing, then that is the karma of negligence, which is a mild form of bad karma. So we should not only have the intention to do good things, we should also have the intention to understand the real consequences of our actions, so that we can cause the most benefit possible and the least harm possible. That's a refinement of right intention. And can delusion and thinking and action is wholesome when it's not stop bad results? No, because actions based on delusion are bad karma by definition. The Buddha states this clearly in a few places in the suttas. Action based on wrong view leads to wrong results. So delusion does not save us from the consequences. On the other hand, if you think an action is beneficial and you do the action sincerely believing that it's a good thing to do, then your intention is pure. So in that sense, you're not making bad karma. In fact, you might be making good karma. But, as I mentioned earlier, if you're not paying careful attention to the real consequences of what you're doing, then you're cultivating the karma of negligence, which is a form of bad karma. So we do need to be a little more precise about this, a little more careful about understanding the actual consequences of our choices. An example of this is there was a monk I know who was living alone in a little hermitage, and some lay people had said they were bringing food to offer for the monk's lunch. And the lay people made some food and brought it and offered it and left. And after they left, when the monk went to eat, they saw that the rice was only partially cooked, and it was too hard to chew. So did the lay people make good karma by offering the rice? Well, hopefully they actually had right intention, the intention to offer food to the monks. But also there was some negligence there because they didn't actually check to make sure that the food was edible before offering it. They didn't actually make sure that it was ready to eat. So it wound up being that then the monk couldn't eat that day. It was too late. Food wasn't edible. So that's an example of the karma of negligence, which has a real consequence. So did the donors make some good karma that day? Yeah, they did make some good karma, but they also made some bad karma. The bad karma of negligence, of not paying attention to the actual effects of our choices. Okay, and Joseph says, what is right view? What is meant by mundane right view and transcendental right view? How should one practice to cultivate, understand, experience, and realize right view? Your turn.
Okay, sure. Well, warmest greetings to you as well. Joe, great to see you again online. Uh, and best wishes to you. And so yes, this is a great question. What is right view? What are the mundane and transcendental right views? Because the Buddha said in detailing the factors of the Noble Eightfold Path, the first factor, samadhi, right view, actually has two aspects to it. And one is mundane right view, which are views that are correct and accurate and very helpful spiritually, but they don't take us. They're not a factor of the path that leads us out of samsara. They don't help us to transcend the round of birth and death. They'll help us within the round of birth and death, and they're a very good platform, in fact, actually. But they can't get us out of birth and death. The transcendental right view can, though, as a factor of the path that's transcendent. And some examples are from there's several examples of mundane right view in the suttas. And some examples are that there are the consequences of good and bad actions, and that there is this world and the next, a reference to rebirth. And there are seekers and sages who proclaim this world and the next, having seen it for themselves. So they have direct knowledge of, for example, things like rebirth and karmic consequences and so on like this. And then transcendental right view is the Four Noble Truths. The view that the noble truth of suffering, and the cause of suffering, which is tanha, thirst, in the ancient Pali language, and the truth of the cessation of suffering, which is that it's possible to abandon and eliminate this thirst and be free of suffering and attain nibbana. And then the fourth noble truth being the path of practice that leads to the cessation of suffering. And so this is the right view that once you attain to it, then it takes you all the way out of the round of rebirths. There you go.
Okay, good. And John says, do you find there's a correlation between excess sodium and sugar intake and emotional sensitivity in formal practice? Do you have any recommendation for a storm of uncomfortable energy that arises during the Uposatha? Well, there's two different questions here. So the first one, I haven't personally noticed any connection with excess sodium, but definitely I've noticed that consuming a lot of sugar can cause emotional instability, can also cause mental dullness, so blurriness of mind. So I personally tend to avoid consuming a lot of sugar. A little bit is okay, but I don't like to consume a lot of it because it definitely does have an impact on the mind. I mean, generally speaking, it's good to remember that we should be eating for the health of the body. So not just to have fun. This is the contemplation that we do every day as monks before eating, as we remind ourselves that food is not for fun, not for pleasure, but just to keep the body healthy so we can keep up our spiritual practice. So we should keep that in mind. We should be trying to eat food that make the body healthy and the mind stable. So definitely avoiding a lot of sugar would fit in that category. As for a storm of uncomfortable energy that arises during the Uposatha, I would say endure. With mindfulness and equanimity, endure. Endure and observe. And be patient. So patiently endure and observe. And what you'll notice is that the suffering is something extra. The feeling of energy coming and going, that's just part of having a body and mind. But suffering is something extra. Suffering is always something extra that we add. So it's a little condiment that we put on our life, which is completely unnecessary. We're always putting a little sprinkle of dukkha on everything, but we don't have to. We can stop sprinkling dukkha on our life if we want to. And one of the ways we do that is through enduring and observing when an uncomfortable experience arises, especially during meditation practice. Okay, and Mariah says, Bhante Sudaso, I'm reading the Majjhima Nikaya Suttas and using your videos for understanding. I understand that in the YouTube playlist, several suttas are missing. Can they be found elsewhere? Probably not. Probably not found elsewhere. So if you're looking for an organized, step-by-step guide to the Majjhima Nikaya, you will not find it from me. Maybe in 20 years I might do something like that, but currently nothing like that exists. Instead, there's a random hodgepodge of random things that I felt like talking about at some point. If there are particular suttas that you want talked about, please send an email to the monastery address. I actually really like getting sutta requests, especially specific passages within longer suttas or short suttas, the whole sutta I can talk about. So if there's specific passages from the Majjhima Nikaya that you want spoken about in more detail, write an email to the monastery, and we'll put it in the queue for upcoming Dhamma talks. And Shelley says, in the first suttas of the Samyutta Nikaya, is the Buddha referring the flood to samsara when he said, when I stood still, I went under, and when I swam, I was swept away. That's how I crossed the flood, neither standing nor swimming. It's a delicious sutta, by the way. I really love it. The translation here is a bit awkward, but the Buddha statement is really beautiful. And yes, he's talking about samsara. So the flood is a metaphor for samsara. And Lydia says, is the wild cow that kills a few people in the suttas a metaphor, or did they just have some mean cows back then? As far as I know, there's only 2 suttas where someone gets killed by a cow, stray cow. I actually never took it as a metaphor, I just took it literally. If you've ever seen a cow in real life, they are big. Cows are big. And yes, they can kill you if they want to. Fortunately, they usually don't want to. And Sister Sunny Free Spirit, I love that name. I wish that was my name. Yeah. And Sister Sunny Free Spirit, that's just delightful. So they say, thank you for going into how we're building stories, just sensory conduct. The brain mind wants to fill it in with stuff. This is the evolutionary survival mechanism. It sounds to me like you're doing some storytelling right there, in fact. All the stuff about brains and evolutionary survival mechanisms, that's all a bunch of extra storytelling. You just overcomplicated things. That's papancha right there. So Sister Sunny Free Spirit, you just gave a live example of the papancha process. So thank you. And Rick says, as a follow-up, can you talk about the nature of direct experience of the sense pleasures of sleep/rest, which can create a sense of craving to the sense pleasure? Can you talk about the nature of the direct experience of the joy and tranquility of deeper meditation? I'm interested in the gratification, the drawback, and escape for these sense pleasures. So we might let these go, these lesser happinesses, for a greater happiness of deeper meditation. Well, so first off, with sleeping and resting, there is a certain amount which we need to do. So if we don't rest enough, then the mind is blurry and dull because it's tired. On the other hand, if we spend all day lazing around, then that also makes the mind blurry and dull. So we need to find the right amount. And there is a certain pleasure in just lazing around in bed and not doing anything. There is a certain pleasure there. But pay attention to the blurriness of mind that it creates. So that's the drawback. The drawback is the blurriness of mind, which makes it difficult to meditate well. Whereas as one gets deeper into meditation practice, then one starts to experience the joy of a still, alert mind. So there's a particular pleasure to a mind which is completely awake yet completely still. And you can only discover that through direct experience. So until you cultivate the joyfulness of a still, alert mind, you won't quite know what we're talking about. But as you cultivate that, then you can pay attention to it and recognize the pleasantness of it. Okay, and we have several more questions. So Demsin says, after listening to many Dhamma talks on practical samatha and based on my own experience, the recommendation of one-pointed attention seems unhelpful or even not so true. You would need to define the terms that you are using here. What do you mean by one-pointed attention, and what do you mean by unhelpful? Demson further says, it seems that one-pointedness is something that takes place rather than something that we do. Your thoughts, please? It is dangerous to view meditation as an entirely passive activity, and it is also dangerous to view it as an entirely active activity. So one-pointedness is something that happens when we cultivate stillness and attention. So what's translated as one-pointedness, by the way, I prefer to translate as unification. The Pali word is ekagata, which means come together, come to oneness, unification. So eka means one. So ekagata means unified. So it's not necessarily one-pointedness in the sense of fixating the mind on a single tiny point, but rather it's unification in the sense that the mind is not scattered or distracted or dispersed, but it's wholly together in doing just the meditation and nothing else. And the thing is that if you actually intentionally, actively focus the mind and steady the mind, then that will support the unification of mind. So sometimes an active approach to meditation is useful. And other times, if we just relax and settle down while keeping the mind alert, then the mind will naturally unify and stabilize. So rather than saying meditation should be passive or should be active, rather it should be understood that meditation is can be either passive or active, and we need to have the wisdom to understand which approach is going to be more helpful at any given moment. And Jeff asks, to what extent are the ritual practices of incense, flower garlands, candles, and spreading gold leaf integral to Buddhism? What are your thoughts about this?
Okay. Bhante, let's see. So the ritual practices of incense, placing flower garlands, candles, and spreading gold leaf integral to Buddhism. And different countries and schools of Buddhism and communities within countries and schools have different ritual traditions. And I'm not familiar with one personally using flower garlands, although I'm not surprised to hear that they are used by some Buddhists in rituals. I ordained in Thailand in 2014, and I've been a Buddhist monk in Burma for a short time as well, about 9 months in the more distant past, and just returned to the United States in February of 2023. And so I know in Thailand they frequently use flowers, candles, and incense in worship services to the Triple Gem, especially on the major Buddhist holidays. But even actually every day, now that I think of it, I think again about a different sort of ritual we do, offering flowers to the Triple Gem on the altar and to the Buddha image, lighting candles and incenses offerings for the morning and evening puja, so that's the worship services. I have seen a gold leaf used for rituals where they actually are putting gold leaf on the Buddha image or the image of a saint, for example, a statue. Sometimes also on even photographs. And the idea is to beautify and glorify the image of the Buddha or the saint who's represented. And when we talk about how integral these physical aspects of the rituals are, and the rituals themselves, the idea is to have some kind of a way of expressing our worship. It says in the Dhammapada, the Buddha says that No matter how many gifts and offerings one might make over the course of an entire year, they don't match the merit of worshiping one who is consummate. And so right there we have in the Dhammapada a statement about the tremendous value of worship. And in fact, when the Buddha attained enlightenment, upon realizing that he'd attained enlightenment, he thought, now who should I depend upon as a superior? Who should I revere? It's not easy to live without someone to depend upon. And seeing that there was no one in the entire universe that was superior to him, he chose to worship the Dhamma and live in reverence of the Dhamma for the entire rest of his life. And there are examples of how they did this in the suttas. And I just thought of another example, that the Mahamangala Sutta, where the Buddha enumerates the highest blessings, the 32 highest blessings or protections. And one of them he notes is that to worship that which is worthy of worship is the highest blessing. And so when we go to worship, having these kinds of physical expressions can be very valuable to help with this feeling that we're doing something in an act of worship. So, for example, I was talking about the morning and evening pujas and making offerings at that. Another common ritual in Thailand was the circumambulation of a Buddha image on the major holidays. So we have candles, incense, and flowers, each person in their hands, and they would circumambulate 3 times after doing some chanting and a dedication and so on like this, and after a Dhamma talk as well. Then do the circumambulation 3 times of the Buddha image, and then offer the candles, flowers, and incense to the Buddha image. And the candle, let's see, the flowers represented the beauty of morality, and the incense represented the single-pointed concentration. And so the lights of fire, the tips of each incense stick, and the candles represented the light of wisdom. And so the worshippers could think about these while they're worshiping the Buddha during the circumambulation, while they're worshiping the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. And so this is very good for contemplation and for expressing the worship.
Sadhu. And James asks, how might one begin using Devanusati in meditation? Is it a productive practice? So Devanusati is recollection of the devas, the angels or celestial beings, heavenly beings. And the way it's defined in a few places in the suttas is to, first off, to recollect the different kinds of devas, and it's given in a formulaic list of remembering the earth devas, so the devas that live here on the same plane as we do. Some people can see them and interact with them. The devas are the 4 great kings, so those are similar to the Greek gods, Roman gods, Norse gods, the pantheons of fairly human-like deities. And then going up from there, the Yama devas, the Tusita devas, and so on. So recollecting the different kinds of devas that exist. And then the Buddha says one should think, what kind of good karma did these devas make in past lives in order to be born as devas? So one starts thinking about practices of generosity, of morality, of wisdom, the kinds of things that lead to having the right kind of karma to be born as devas. And then one should think, I also have done those kinds of good deeds. I also have cultivated those wholesome mind states. I have made exactly the same kind of karma that the devas made in past lives in order to be reborn as devas. I also have the karma to be reborn as a deva. I also have made the karma necessary to be a deva. So the point of Devanusati is not actually the devas themselves, but rather it's a way of cultivating self-esteem. It's a way of cultivating a wholesome regard for our own good qualities that we've been practicing, an appreciation for the good karma that we've been developing, an appreciation for the good deeds, the good practices that we've been doing, which are building up good karma, and which can lead to rebirth in heavenly realms as angelic beings. So that's how it's described in the suttas. And I've sometimes used Devanusati as a practice, and I found it especially useful combining it with metta. So again, thinking about the devas, the different kinds of devas, the good things that they've done in order to be born as devas, thinking of their happy lives and wishing, may they have long and happy and delightful lives as devas. And for me, I found that very uplifting, bringing a lot of joy to the mind. So Devanusati is a joyful practice. So recollecting the joyfulness of the devas, all the good things that they've done in order to be reborn as devas, and then recognizing that we ourselves have done the same good things and are destined to be born as devas as well. So that's how the practice is described in the suttas. And Mike says, how does one share merit with others? It's an intention in the mind. Whenever you do a good thing, wish, may the merit of this also go to the benefit of these others. You can think of specific people and wish, may my good karma benefit these specific people as well. Or you can dedicate it to all beings. It's very commonly done, especially in Mahayana Buddhism. May all beings share in the blessings of my life, the goodness of my practice. So it can be as simple as that. It doesn't need to be anything more elaborate than that. And Joe has a question. He says, can you share some skillful reflections on self-compassion when the mind and heart frets over the one thing done unskillfully and ignores the 9 other things done skillfully? When the pain of remorse arises, are we to watch the pain in the heart with equanimity? The pain has already arisen, so we surround it with care instead of trying to get rid of it. Please encourage. What are your thoughts?
Sure. Okay. Well, great questions, Joe. This is such a common human experience, the experience of regret, remorse, and feeling bad about things we've done in the past. And of course, we've all made mistakes, and so we'll naturally all have to experience this at some point or other. And so one thing we can do is we can reflect that that these emotions are, while they're quite natural, they're not actually beneficial. We can reflect. Well, this emotion that I'm having doesn't actually, in and of itself, cause me to do anything good. Skillful emotions like loving kindness and compassion, as you mentioned, they're actually skillful emotions that cause us to do good things. That's this one reflection. What good does this cause me to do? Well, it doesn't cause me to do anything good. This emotion. We can also reflect that this emotion, the regret, the remorse, the fretting, is actually it's unpleasant. If we notice that, and with some mindfulness, it's remarkable how the mind can notice this. We may be suffering, but maybe the heart doesn't realize this. Ironically. And if the heart realizes actually what kind of suffering it's creating for itself, it's remarkable how it can let go. I might add that if we can make the mind calm, then these techniques are all more effective. And so sometimes it can help to simply first go to a meditation technique that we have experience with, that we know is useful for helping us make the mind calm. One that's very simple and straightforward is the recollection of peace. Simply considering and wishing for ourselves, may I be calm, may I be calm, may I be calm. If we can put our attention on this with this wish, and then you see what kind of feelings come up also. And once we've made the mind calm a little bit, then we can work with these kinds of reflections. And so, those are some observations I can offer, some ideas.
Great, thank you. And Karuna asks, does the simile of lapping water from a cow's footprint mean there's at least that much goodness in the person we hate? Or that we should be as desperate to find their goodness as we would be for water? I would say both. The truth is that it is extraordinarily difficult to find someone who is 100% evil. Even really bad people tend to still have a little bit of goodness in them somewhere, or at least something at least slightly admirable somewhere. So that is one thing I think the Buddha is pointing to here, is he's saying that even in the most abjectly horrible person, if we look really carefully, we can find something good to appreciate or admire. And also that we should, as you say, we should be as desperate to find the goodness as we would be for water. So the metaphor here is of somebody who is dying of thirst, and the only water they can find is this little puddle on the ground. So when you're dying of thirst, you're grateful that you found even just a little puddle on the ground. So in the same way, yes, we should be as desperate seeking for the goodness in others as someone dying of thirst would be seeking for water. So yes, I think that's a good way to interpret it as well. And that's the last question from online. And so I think we can go ahead and conclude the session at this time. So thank you for all your delightful questions and another wonderful Dhamma discussion. And we can conclude with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. We'll see you next time.